Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar on Power BI. My name is Julia Honigsberger and I'm a Business Intelligence and Analytics Consultant at Thorogood Associates, and I'm going to be the presenter for this session today. We've actually got quite a lot to get through at today's session, so we probably won't have time for live Q&A, but if anyone does have a question, you can use the chat panel at the bottom right of your screen, or if a question comes to mind after we've run the event, just drop me an email. My email address is on the screen there, or you can contact us through the thorogood.com website on the Contact Us page. For those of you who don't know Thorogood, we're a specialist consultancy and we focus on BI and analytics. We partner with a number of software vendors, but of key interest for today's session is our Gold Certified Partner status with Microsoft for data analytics, which is BI as was, and for intelligent systems, things like SharePoint and cloud-based software. And this gives us a great interface to the Microsoft development team, so we can not only understand what their thinking is around their product roadmaps, but we can also input into the direction of the product. We can feed back on early betas and pre-releases, and that's something we did on Power BI. We're going to link today's agenda to the GA release, which was the 24th of July. There, Microsoft announced that Power BI was generally available. And for this release, Microsoft had included a number of what I think are really key improvements to the product, which I think move it really into the data visualization tool space. So today we're going to be looking at Power BI Desktop, PowerBI.com, and we're going to touch a bit on Power BI Mobile. For those of you who aren't familiar with Power BI, it's Microsoft's cloud-based reporting and dashboarding environment. And it can consume data from a number of sources, as we'll see later when I do a demo, but they include things like analysis services and SQL Server, as well as some of the Microsoft cloud offerings like Dynamics and 365. It can also generate analytics for other software as a service technologies like Salesforce and Google Analytics, and with those you get a great pre-canned analytics start to get you up and running quickly. In the preview version, which was released sort of end of March, beginning of April time, it supported two main interfaces for authoring of reports and visualizations. We had Excel with Power Query, Power Pivot and Power View, but also a desktop download called Power BI Designer, which effectively consumed these three Power capabilities into a desktop tool completely separate from Excel. This then allowed you to render your reports through PowerBI.com on the web, and it used HTML5, so it moved away from the Silverlight constraints that really inhibited mobile delivery. And that enabled Microsoft to deliver to mobile devices, and I think interestingly, their first choice was iOS rather than Windows. I think it was recognition that this was where the vast chunk of the mobile market lay. Let's fast forward to the end of July and this GA release, and there's been a number of features that I think have made quite a big difference to the technology. So starting top left, the desktop authoring tool has been renamed Power BI Desktop, and in that they've extended it to include much more sophisticated data loading, transformations, visualizations, and I think a key part of it is the control over those visualizations. And the focus has really moved away from Excel because that Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View capability is really now encapsulated within Power BI Desktop, and we'll have a look at that later. Microsoft has introduced a new link which I think is pretty significant, and that is a live link to SQL Server analysis services in tabular mode. So this means that Power BI can query an on-prem tabular model, overcoming what for some of our customers was seen as a big concern around putting data in the cloud. It's tabular only at the moment, but we do see the multidimensional option coming pretty soon because it's something that a lot of people are asking for. There are some new software as a service links too for customers who've got those technologies in-house. And the web browser has been brought in line with the desktop version in terms of authoring and collaboration. So that's now quite a rich environment. And finally, they've included the Android version to improve BI's appropriateness to the mobile market, Windows is still not available on mobile phone devices, but you can get a download for your Surface. I think it's Windows 8, running Windows 8, that you can download something for that. So moving forward a lot with the mobile environment. So I think what's best to do now is go into a demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Power BI Desktop, which is an application that I've downloaded, and towards the end of this session I'll explain how you can download the version as well. The first thing you notice is that they've changed the branding. They've brought it in line with the PowerBI.com branding, black and gold. Some new changes. You can now pin your frequent reports to the pane so you can open them quickly. But what I'm going to do is use the Get Data option here to see some of the data sources you can connect to. And there's quite a long list, starting off with the obvious things like Excel, CSVs, etc. As I scroll down, you see focus on the database technologies, SQL Server, Access is in there. Then we've got Oracle, Sybase, Teradata, and as I mentioned, SQL Server Analysis Services. If I click on that and choose Connect, this is one of the new options I mentioned that I think is pretty significant. The ability to explore a tabular model using a live connection. So normally with Power BI, you can access a database or a data connection, and it will import the data and create an in-memory model. With this particular connection, it doesn't import the data, and that data will stay on-prem. And as I mentioned earlier, we are expecting that to be extended to the multidimensional version as well as the tabular model. I'm actually not going to link to an AS cube at this point because I want to show some of the transformation and load options. So I'll cancel out of that and go back to my list. I'll carry on scrolling down a little bit to show some of the other things. So we've got things like Google Analytics and Salesforce. These are the software as a service apps for which Microsoft have built some pre-canned analytics. And scrolling down to the bottom, we can see the new items, the QuickBooks, Zendesk, Twilio, SuiteIQ. If you're a user of those softwares, this is quite a useful way to get a fast start on analytics. The reason it says beta is simply because at this point Microsoft is still happy to take feedback on the usability of these interfaces. So they are working, but they are, as I say, quite happy to take feedback. I'm just going to link to an Excel workbook for today's session. And on my desktop, I have a 10 meg extract of some orders and some returns. So I'm going to open that up, and it's going to connect to that workbook and start to interrogate it to understand what's in there in terms of data items, data columns, and also multiple tabs of data. Fairly large workbook, so it'll take a few minutes. Just move that over a little bit. Just to point out one of the new areas of Power BI Desktop, which is this visualizations pane, and we're going to be looking at that a bit later. This is the area where we have far greater control over our visualizations that we're going to surface. So I've actually got 3 tabs I'm interested. I've got a People's tab, a Returns tab, and an Orders tab, and those are the data sheets that I'm interested in bringing through. And Power BI is going to go and look at those and preview them for me, and I can just have a quick look and see whether I think they're all right to load straight in, or whether I want to edit any of the information in them. Now I can see a problem straight away on my Orders tab because my first row isn't being taken as a header row. So I'm going to do a bit of editing, and I'm now going into the Power BI editor. Again, it's going to take a little bit of time, fairly large workbook, to load all the data in, and when it's done that, I can start to use some of the new features to improve the data model that I'm going to be working with. So here I am in the query editor, and one thing to note is it's a floating window, so I can move it around. Before it was a locked window, I was either in the editor or in the visualizations. I can now be in both of them at the same time. And I can see here that I've got a problem because my first row, which was my headers in Excel, was being taken as my data tab. That's an easy one to fix. Use first row as headers. Click on that, and it will resolve that issue. And while it does that, it starts to build up a list of all the transformations that I've done, and at any point if I make a mistake, I can just remove that transformation. I can change the format of columns, so that ship date, it's taking as text. If I want to do any time series work, I might want to change that to a date field. And in particular, I know that often when Excel loads in, it considers things to be text when I want them to be numbers. I'm going to scroll over a bit, and I can see 5 data columns here: sales, quantity, discount, profit, and cost. They're left aligned, which is a red flag to me that they're taking them as text, and I'm going to change those to a decimal. I've got my 3 tabs that I loaded in. I'm going to quickly take a look at my returns tab, and again I need to fix that header problem, use first row as headers. And there are some neat new features around loading data around character manipulation. If I look at my orders column, I can see that the first 2 characters are in fact the country, which I haven't got yet. I've got the market but not the country. And I can choose to add a column and extract from my highlighted column either a particular length, the first N characters, the last N. I'm going to strip out the first 2 characters and create a new column which is going to be country, and I can then use that for aggregations or filters and things like that. I'll call that country. There we go. But otherwise I'm happy with that returns tab. And finally on my people tab, again, same issue around my first row of headers. They've also built in some quite neat improvements to joining with queries. So for those of you who are used to SQL joins, we've got much better left, right, inner, outer join types. I won't show that today. But I'm now reasonably happy that my data is ready to start visualizing. So I'm going to go to my reporting pane. A change to the GA version is I now have 3 options: close and load, load and close. I'm going to kick off a close and load while I explain the difference. It's fairly basic really. Close and load will close my editor pane and load the data into a model that I can use for my visualizing. Load will do an interim load into that visualization area, but it will leave me in the editor and I can carry on doing more edits. So I might want to do that if I've done quite a lot of work and want to just make sure it's available to my reports. And close is exactly the opposite. It leaves the reporting model as was and doesn't push any of those through from the editor model. In the background now, it's building my in-memory model that I'm going to be able to use to create my visualizations. So most of the field area was in the previous version, but I'll very quickly build a visualization. So for example, if I wanted to look at information by category, for example, and maybe I want to look at sales, it's as easy as clicking and I get a table. At that point, let's make it a little bit bigger, and let's maybe change that to a bar chart. Pretty straightforward, nothing particularly new here versus the preview model, but there are some nice features that I'm going to cover which just allow me to make this look a little bit more professional. The first one that I like is using the color saturation. So I'm looking at sales here, but I can, if I want, for example, drag profit onto color saturation. And what I'm doing there is I'm using 2 measures on the same chart, so I can see exactly what my sales are of furniture, technology, etc. But I can see that my profit on furniture is not looking as good as my profit on technology because of the saturation level I've applied. I can also create some measures in the front end now. So I can create a new measure, and for example, I might have profit percent, and that's going to be the sum of profit divided by the sum of sales. So I've created a percentage which might be of more use for my saturation, because I would expect to see higher profit where I've made more sales. So if I drop that one there and I bring in my new profit percent, I can start to see that actually office supplies profit percentage is still pretty healthy, but I really still have a problem around furniture. So I can do quite a lot with that, but the really key new feature is the formatting capability. What I can do is I can start to interact with the chart to make it look a lot better. I can, for example, put the title on the graph. I can do that for the X and the Y axis. I'm going to quickly go back actually and remove that saturation because there's a feature that I think is quite effective, certainly for some of our customers, and that's the data colours. So the data colours allows me to associate a colour with a particular dimension value. So if I'm always working with these three categories, and maybe my business always has furniture yellow, office supplies, say, pink, and technology green, it's a great visual clue. I don't even have to look at the labels now. If I always show furniture in yellow, I can instantly see that that's what that item refers to. So that's quite useful. I can add data labels onto there. I can scale the data labels if I want. I might want to change the title, add a bit more information, maybe put it in some sort of banner. I probably want to change my font color there to white and maybe center it. So I can start to make it look a lot more customized to how my organization might display its data. I can even put a background color on. I could make it a nice pink, and I'll ramp that down a little bit to make it a little bit paler. And there's my first visualization. And I can move that over, and that starts to build up my report. And I could publish that one report if I wanted to, or I could start to add other information. So I might just drag sales onto my desktop by country. I know that's geospatial, so I'm going to show that as a map. Power BI has drawn a nice map for me. And the two things are related. So if I click on North America, my chart on the left-hand side updates. Similarly, if I click on Asia, I see the equivalent there. So building stuff now is a lot easier, and it's also a lot more customizable. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to a visualization that I've already done, really just to save time rather than building it all from scratch. So I'm going to open a workbook that I had created earlier. It does open it in a new window, which is interesting. It means I'll have two Power BI desktop windows open, and it's going to load the model in. This model is looking at insurance data, insurance market data. It's looking at losses, claims, things like that. And you can see I can bring in text, which I couldn't before. I can bring in some images. And there are 4 really new graph types within Power BI GA that are covered within this workbook. 2 new ones are on the bottom. So we've got the area chart over here, and we've got the donut chart on the right. And as before, if I click on something, any chart that is linked through the same data set will update to show the donut chart showing that actually the majority of paid losses in the UK are through the bank, whereas in the US it's in the insurance side. It's a 2-page report. So if I look at the second page, the gauge and the combo bar line chart were available in previous versions of Power BI, but we've now got a waterfall chart and what's called a matrix chart. So the waterfall chart is a pretty neat way of showing really how changes build up to a total, and it's something that if the technology doesn't support is very, very hard to do manually. And I'll get rid of the fields for this one, but just show on the visualization side. I can change the sentiment colors, so if an increase is bad, I could make that red, for example, and make the decrease green. So I can flex the colors of the sentiment to show how it's stepping up to my total. The other new visualization is the matrix, which is a way of cross-tabbing data. When I started off, I looked at sales by category, but that was just one-dimensional. What I've done here is I've looked at losses by class of business and by geographic region. So this cross tab is quite a neat way of breaking data out, and I can nest things. If I just remove that for a second and go to my Fields tab, and I've got a parent class of business selected. I'll select class of business as well. Let's make this a bit bigger, choose that desktop. Move it over a little bit to get a bit more on. And you can start to see that I've now got a sort of hierarchy. It's not a drill up, drill down hierarchy, but it is a way of showing information broken out by various levels of business. I'm lucky enough to have a back tab, so I can get rid of these changes quite quickly. Back to where we started from. What I'm now going to do is I'm happy with that visualization, and I now want to publish it. And I publish it really for 3 key reasons. Firstly, because I might want to share it with colleagues. Secondly, I might want to include it in my dashboard. And thirdly, I might want to look at it on a mobile device. And I think those are the key reasons why I would be publishing this to PowerBI.com. And I do that through the publish. And you note that there are 2 options here now. One is publish to PowerBI.com in the cloud, and the second is publish to Pyramid Server. Now, this was a really interesting announcement that came out on the 24th of July, where Microsoft announced that they've been working with Pyramid Analytics, which is a software vendor that provides an analytical tool on top of primarily the Microsoft toolset, database engines, but also other engines through ODBC, building tabular models if it needs to, providing a pretty good user experience for cut, slice, dice, filter, etc. Microsoft recognized that the uploading of information to the cloud might be of a concern to some organizations, and therefore they have partnered with Pyramid to allow you to publish your Power BI desktop workbooks to Pyramid Server and therefore keep it on-premise. I'm now going to publish to the cloud. So it's going to take that workbook, it's created an in-memory model along with the visualizations, and it's going to publish that up to PowerBI.com. That was successful, and it allows me directly from here now to open it. One thing to note, in previous versions it was a pull, so I'd have had to close that workbook down, go into Power BI, find the workbook on my desktop and upload it. Now I can just push it from within the development environment straight through to PowerBI.com. So a better user experience, I think. I'm going to click on this and open up my Power BI. I've already got a window open with some other stuff, but we'll stay on this because it's going to take me into the dashboard that I've just been authoring. And it works exactly the same on the web as it did on the desktop. So when I click, my graphs interact. I can edit the report. At that point, I get exactly the same interface as I did in my desktop tool. So if I was to share this information, it could be collaborated on by other people. I'll go back to just the reading view. So PowerBI.com, quick overview, 3 areas: dashboards, reports, and data sets. Data sets are connections to data, so you can publish those so that people can access them. Reports, we've just seen I updated a report or uploaded a report. And dashboards are ways of collecting pieces of information from across my organization in different reports. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new dashboard for today. I'm going to call it Webinar. And I'm going to pin some visualizations from existing reports to my dashboard. So the first thing I'm going to do is find that report I've just uploaded. I think it was called Insurance Webinar. And I can take a visual out of this. I think the gauge would be a good one to put on a dashboard. And I've got a little pin. And if I click on Pin Visual, and I now go back to my dashboard, I can see that that visual's been pinned. But I want to collect information from various reports that have been published. So I'm going to choose a different one now. I'm going to maybe choose Lost Details. Let's have a look at that. And there are some visuals on here that are quite useful. I'll just pin that first one for now onto my desktop. Get rid of those messages. And now when I go back to my dashboard, I've got 2 visuals. They could come from the same data source. They could come from different data sources. When I click on one, it takes me through to all of the contextual information that's going to help me understand that. So it's a bit of guided analytics. I've got my 2-page report that I can access to see maybe what's driving that gauge. There's one other thing I was going to show in PowerBI.com, which is Q&A. It has the ability for users to type in almost English language questions. So let's say, for example, I want to look at incurred loss by year, maybe. It instantly is starting to draw the visual for me, and maybe because it's over time, I want that to be a line chart. So I can start to use English language to define my queries and my views, as well as drag and drop. And if I pin that now as well to my desktop and go back, I'm starting to build up my visuals, not only through previously published reports, but also through reports that have been put up there, and also through querying. That's all I've got time really to show on Power BI for today. Just to finish off, I wanted to cover very quickly licensing. Power BI licensing model is twofold really. There's a free version. Both the desktop and PowerBI.com have a free version. It does have some limitations, which mean that for enterprise users, it might run out of steam quite quickly, and you'd need to move to the subscription-based Pro model, which is currently $9.99 per user per month. So you're talking about $120 a year, or about £75 a year per user. And that then allows large data volumes, enterprise features like connecting to tabular models live, and also mobile. I've got a couple of scenarios here I wanted to highlight because there have been changes since the very first preview releases of Power BI. If you want Power BI and you don't have Office 365 or SharePoint, in previous versions you would have had a problem, but they've now removed that restriction. So now you can have Power BI Desktop and PowerBI.com without 365 or SharePoint. So it opens it up to users who don't have those technologies. And similarly, in the early versions where we were authoring with Power Query and Power View in Excel 2013, if you didn't have 2013 you were restricted. Again, that's gone now because the focus has moved to Power BI Desktop and PowerBI.com. So, to summarise what we've looked at today, we've seen some improvements to both the modelling and also the visualising and authoring of reports, more graph types. We saw matrix, donut, area and waterfall, and much better formatting of those charts. We've seen some on-premise integration that we didn't have before, so a live link to SQL Server tabular model, and we hope there'll be links to the multidimensional model soon, and also publishing to pyramid analytics to give you an on-prem solution. We've seen some improved web-based authoring and some collaboration in PowerBI.com. And as I mentioned, there's an Android version now as well as iOS. And for Surface, there is a download as well, but not for mobile Windows. We haven't got time today to cover the mobile side, but if you are interested, if you look on our website back to the on-demand events, back in April we ran a Microsoft event which covers mobile BI, so you can find it there. If you want to try it out, you can go to powerbi.microsoft.com/desktop, where you'll see a download button, and that will download that Power BI desktop app that I was using for authoring. And also, if you want to have a look at what that will give you versus the free version will give you versus the Pro version, on that page click Product Pricing, and that will show you the features that you get for free and the features that you'll need to buy the Pro licensing for. And if you need any help, Thorogood has a lot of experience working with customers, helping them to evaluate technologies just like Power BI, selection of technology, self-serve strategy, which again I think is something that's coming up with products like Power BI, and proofs of concept to see how this would work in your organisation. So do reach out if you need any help with any of those areas. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. We have had a few questions on the chat panel, which we will reply to, but as I mentioned earlier, if you do have any questions after the session, just drop me an email. In fact, julia@thorogood.com will reach me just as well, or get in touch through our website. Thanks very much for your time today. I hope you found it useful.